Everything HR told you about protecting you is a lie, not a mistake, a lie. Your HR department isn't designed to help employees, it's designed to contain liability. It's a corporate immune system. And the moment you understand that, the 3 responses they gave you, no policy violation, communication styles, escalate yourself, stop looking like negligence and start looking exactly like what they are, a deliberate strategy to end your complaint without ending your employment. There is a foundational misunderstanding that most employees carry into every interaction with HR. The misunderstanding is this, that HR exists to protect employees. It doesn't. HR exists to protect the company. I want to be precise about what I mean because this isn't a cynical take, it's a description of how the function is structured. HR reports to the organization. HR is funded by the organization. HR's mandate in the vast majority of companies is to manage risk on behalf of the organization. That means legal risk, reputational risk, financial risk from litigation. When you walk into HR and describe a situation involving your manager and psychological manipulation, the question HR is trained to evaluate is not, how do we make this right for this employee? The question is, what does this situation cost us if we acknowledge it happened, and what does it cost us if we don't? In most cases, when the claim involves something difficult to prove, and when the person accused has more organizational capital than the person making the accusation, the math is straightforward. Acknowledging abuse opens the company to liability. Framing it as a communication style or a personality mismatch or an unsubstantiated complaint closes that exposure. That's not a conspiracy, it's a risk calculation, and it's being made with information you were never given. There's a second layer to this that makes the process feel even more disorienting when you're inside it. When you report your manager to HR will typically speak with your manager first before they circle back to you with their findings. Your manager has been in the company longer. They have relationships that you don't have. They understand how to frame things in organizational language, and they've had time to prepare because you told HR what you told them, and HR told your manager. The investigation that follows is not neutral. It begins with a structural asymmetry that almost always favors the person with more power. What you get at the end of that process is not a verdict, it's a record. A document that says the company looked into it and found nothing actionable. That document protects the company, not you. Understanding this doesn't mean you should never go to HR. It means you should never go to HR without understanding what HR actually is. It is not your advocate, it is not your attorney, it is the company's risk management function wearing a friendly title. Most complaints to HR fail before they're even heard. Not because the situation wasn't real, but because of the condition in which the complaint arrives. There are 4 specific failure modes that account for most of what goes wrong. The first is arriving without documentation. A verbal account of a pattern of behavior with no dates, no specifics, no contemporaneous record is not something HR can act on, even in the rare case that they wanted to. My manager consistently undermines me in meetings is a feeling. On March 4th, in the project review, with the full team present, my manager attributed the revised forecast I submitted to a colleague who had no involvement in it. This is the 3rd time this has occurred since January, is a factual claim with a record. One of these gives HR something to investigate, the other gives them a reason to close the file. The second failure mode is emotional presentation. This is not a critique of people who are in pain. If you've been in a gaslighting environment for months or years, arriving emotional is completely understandable. But HR's categorization process is not sympathetic. A complaint delivered with visible distress, with tears, with obvious frustration, with urgency, gets filed, consciously or not, as a subjective complaint. This person is struggling carries less institutional weight than here is a documented pattern of specific behavior with measurable impact on performance. The emotional response is real. The strategy has to be separate from it. The third failure mode is wrong language. My manager makes me feel bad, activates no legal mechanism. My manager makes me feel like I don't belong, activates nothing. My manager systematically denies agreements we've reached in writing, which has created conditions I would characterize as a hostile work environment and which has directly impacted my ability to perform my role. That language activates something very specific. The difference is not dramatic, it's terminological. Terms like hostile work environment, pattern of behavior, retaliation, protected class, adverse action, these are phrases with legal weight. They signal to HR that whoever is sitting across from them understands the framework, and that changes the risk calculation. The fourth failure mode is showing everything before you're protected. When you walk into HR's office and lay out everything, your witnesses, your theory of what's happening, your strategy, You are giving the company a full picture of your position before they've given you anything in return. What you've just done is handed them a map of what they need to address to defend themselves against you. Every piece of information you share before you're in a protected position is information that can be used to preempt your next move. So, given all of that, what can actually be done? There are 4 levers of real power available to someone in this situation, not unlimited options, not a guarantee of any particular outcome, 4 specific levers. And understanding which one applies to your situation and in what order to use them is the difference between a complaint that goes nowhere and a position that actually has leverage. The first lever, and the one you should start building before anything else, is a paper trail. Everything that matters in this situation eventually comes down to what you can prove, not what you experience, not what you know to be true, what you can demonstrate with a contemporaneous record. The paper trail is not dramatic. It's not a legal preparation in the way most people imagine. It's a simple, private, systematic log on your personal device, not a work device, of what happened, when, who was present, and what the concrete impact on your work was. The most powerful element of the paper trail isn't the log itself, it's the confirmation emails. After every significant conversation with your manager, especially any conversation that involved a direction, a commitment, a decision, or anything you'd want documented, you send a brief follow-up, not accusatory, not unusual, just professional. Following up on our conversation this afternoon, confirming we landed on X for the deliverable, deadline is Y, and scope is Z. Let me know if that doesn't match your understanding. Most managers won't respond to these emails with corrections unless they have a reason to establish a different record. And if they do respond to rewrite what was agreed, that rewrite is now in writing with a timestamp attached to the original message you sent immediately after the conversation. You've just made the rewrite almost impossible to execute. The second lever is internal escalation above HR. HR is not the only mechanism available inside the company. In most organizations, there are skip level options, the ability to raise a concern to your manager's manager or to senior leadership directly when the standard channel has failed or is compromised. There are also, in many companies, ethics hotlines, ombudsperson functions, or anonymous reporting mechanisms designed specifically for situations where the direct chain of command is the problem. The strategic constraints around this lever are specific. You escalate only when you have documentation, never before. Arriving at a VP's office with a verbal account and no record is not strategic escalation. It's giving them the chance to align with your manager before you've built any position, and you escalate in the language of business impact, not in the language of how you've been treated. The pattern of behavior I've documented has resulted in the following specific consequences for team output and project delivery. Opens a conversation. My manager doesn't treat me fairly, opens a referral back to HR. One important thing to know about this lever, escalating internally can trigger retaliation. Not always, not necessarily, but with enough frequency that you should understand the risk before you pull it. If your situation involves any protected characteristics or any prior complaint that could constitute retaliation, the third lever may need to come before this one. The third lever is external pressure, and it's the one the company fears most. If your situation involves discrimination based on race, gender, age, religion, disability, national origin, or any other protected characteristic, or if it involves retaliation for having raised a concern, you have access to a mechanism outside the company's control. In the United States, that mechanism is the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Filing a charge with the EEOC doesn't require an attorney. It doesn't require you to have decided to sue anyone. It is simply the act of creating an external record of what you've reported and when. The effect of that record on the company's risk calculation is significant. The moment there is an EEOC filing, the company has documented external exposure. That changes the math on whether it's cheaper to continue the status quo or to address what's happening. Before you do this, talk to an employment attorney. Not because you're necessarily going to litigation, but because you need to understand what the filing protects and what deadlines apply. Most people don't know that many employment attorneys offer free initial consultations. You don't need money to get basic guidance on whether this lever applies to your situation. You just need to know that it exists. One more thing about this lever. The fact that you've consulted an attorney or are considering an external filing is not information you share with HR. Not yet. Not until the timing serves you, not them. The fourth lever, and the one that produces the most resistance when I raise it, is the strategic exit. It feels like defeat. I understand that. If you've been in a situation where you're being systematically undermined, where your competence is being quietly eroded in the eyes of the people around you, where you've tried to address it and been dismissed, being told that leaving might be the right answer feels like one more thing being taken from you. But there is a specific and critical distinction between a reactive exit and a strategic one. A reactive exit is what happens when you've had enough. You resign, probably on a Monday, probably after a particularly difficult conversation, probably without a plan, definitely without leverage. You lose income continuity. You lose whatever legal position you might have been building. You hand the company a clean narrative. The employee left of their own accord. Nothing to see here. A strategic exit is different in every dimension. You continue working, you continue documenting, you begin building your external position, securing the next role, or at minimum establishing that you have external options while you're still employed. Because being employed while you explore options preserves legal rights that evaporate the moment you resign. It preserves income. It preserves negotiating leverage. And in some cases, more often than people realize, it creates the conditions for a negotiated separation. Companies frequently prefer paying a structured departure package to facing the ongoing risk of an employee who has documentation, who has consulted an attorney, and who has not resigned. The decision to leave is not weakness. It is often the highest leverage move available. The difference is whether you leave on their terms or yours. Let me say one thing before we close that I think matters more than any of the tactics we just covered. If you've spent months or years in an environment that has made you doubt your competence, your judgment, your value, and you're watching this video because some part of you is still trying to figure out what you did wrong, I want you to hear this clearly. The damage that kind of environment doesn't disappear when you change jobs. It follows you. It shows up in how you present yourself in the next interview. It shows up in how quickly you second guess decisions in the next role. It shows up in the low-level belief that the pattern will eventually repeat because there must be something about you that causes it. There isn't. What happened was not a reflection of your capabilities. It was the predictable output of a specific kind of environment that was designed, intentionally or not, to make you feel exactly this way. Recognizing that, not just intellectually, but in the way you speak about yourself, in the way you assess your own work, is part of what recovery actually looks like. It takes longer than one video, but it starts with understanding what was actually happening to you. The next video changes direction. Instead of surviving the situation, we talk about building the kind of position where this situation can't take root in the first place. What it means to make yourself structurally difficult to target before anyone comes for you. That's linked on screen. Subscribe if this is useful. There's more where this came from.